Welcome to G5 Classified, your one-stop shop for all things Group of 5 college football. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Gabe Kuhn and Kyron Samuels. Now, let's talk some G5 football.
Yes, sir. Off and rolling. Episode 16 of the G5 Classified podcast is here. We have a lot to discuss. We'll talk about the college football playoff here in just a moment. Riley Ferguson, how about this, man? Riley Ferguson, a lot of Memphis fans been wondering what he's been up to over the years after being phenomenal on the teams I was a part of the last 2 years for my time on campus. He finished in 2017, but Riley Ferguson, former Memphis quarterback, will join, and then we'll get into our Group of 5 discussion. But Gabe Kuhn with you, Kyron Samuels as well. Kai, what's happening, brother? How's it going?
What's happening, man?
Happy New Year.
We had a lot of bowl games. We had a lot of playoff action going, so I'm ready to get into it because I think it's pretty much going how we thought it would outside of one game so far, and we'll get to that in a little while.
Yeah, I want to get right into that game, though. I really do want to get right into that game because it's going on right now. For those that don't know, we record on a Wednesday. We publish on a Thursday. But unless there's some miraculous comeback by the number one team in the country, the Big 12 or Big 10 champion, Oregon Ducks, it looks like an absolute ass kicking. Ohio State over Oregon in the rematch. And I don't know exactly what's going on, but really what it feels like to me is Oregon was not as ready to play this game as Ohio State was. You just watch the film. You just cut on the TV and see what Ohio State's doing. They're playing with more physicality. Jeremiah Smith is burning everybody in the Oregon secondary right now. This just looks like a absolute stomping. And I'll get to what I sort of want to have a conversation about. But what do you see so far?
Well, I think the biggest discrepancy in the game is the amount of I don't know if I want to give Jim Knowles too much credit because I think the lack of adjustment on Oregon's part offensively is the biggest like downturn in the game so far. Will Stein, we've talked about it ad nauseum this season. What they do on offense is very simple. It's very vanilla, and it works because they have a bevy of options, right? When you're playing teams that may not be as talented as Ohio State, the options always work out because you have a Evan Stewart, you have a Tez Johnson, you have a Terrence Ferguson. So when they take away one thing out of the vanilla offense, you can just go to the second or third read because you have those options and you have a quarterback like Dillon Gabriel, 6-year guy, 63 starts. He's been through it all. He's seen it all. And the offensive line has relatively protected them pretty well all season. When somebody takes that away, we saw it in the Wisconsin game. When somebody takes that away, they haven't really had the answers for that. And I think that is just from the lack of opportunity. I don't know if to say opportunity, the lack of adjustment and the lack of I don't want to say he's overmatched and outmatched. I'm trying to be nice here. Put the Will Stein. I'm struggling to find the words to keep it somewhat respectable, but he just looks overmatched. I don't think there's been much of an adjustment. I think they can attack them vertically, but everything is short underneath routes, the crossing routes that have been stopped. And this is one thing we had all season. If you could take the crossing routes away from Oregon, if you could take the middle of the field stuff away from Oregon, can they respond? Can they adjust? So far, they haven't. And that's the biggest detriment to the game right now for them.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because, like, back half of the season, like, first part of the season, we're wondering, okay, where are these deep shots? Or are they pushing the ball downfield, getting vertical with their routes? You saw that happen toward the back half of the season. You saw everybody start to come alive. Right. But in this game, everything's just sort of null and void. Everything, it feels like they forgot everything. And also, I think another part of this is they're just getting owned up front. They're not running the ball worth a damn. 13 rushes for 13 yards in the first half. That's a problem. Yeah, if you're going to be a well-balanced offense, and we know Will Stein likes to get into a lot of play action concepts, you're going to have to keep a defense honest. And they were able to do that against Ohio State the first time around. But this time it just does not look that way. Now they can make some adjustments, and hell, everything we're talking about right now could be completely dumb. This would be on freezing cold takes by the morning, but it does not look good for Oregon at this current moment. Now let's go ahead and get to another Big Ten team. Penn State advances, beats Boise 31-14. And really, I just want to start by saying shout out to Boise State for a phenomenal season. Yeah. You just ran into a team that was more physical, bigger, stronger, faster than you, especially along their front seven. Ashton Jeanty couldn't get it going. And from then on, they really weren't able to put themselves in a position. I never thought that they had a chance to win that game. I also think they just made some uncharacteristic mistakes that really put them in a bad position in the first half. 2 fumbles by Ashton Genty. You had the missed field goal to start the game after a nice little drive. You can't make those mistakes when you get into the college football playoff and expect to win against a team that's as talented and solid as Penn State.
Yeah, and one thing I want to give Boise State credit for is we talk about the score. The game wasn't really that close. All right, I know that they made some inopportune mistakes. I know that I saw a stat that said they had, all those interceptions, 2 fumbles, a missed field goal, and it was like the first time that combination had happened in like over 40-something years. I think it was Opta Sports, the analytics company that tweeted it out. But I want to give the credit because what I saw from my eyes, they were the better coached football team last night.
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere near as talented, nowhere near as deep, and that's probably why the score was the score. But, man, I love the job that they did. They did some really cool things, taking advantage of the passing game, the passing defense of Penn State and some of those passing concepts, just taking what they give them, 4 or 5 yards here and there, staying ahead of the sticks. They did some really cool things with some of the downfield throwing. And Maddox Madsen, even though he doesn't have – we always knew that when they got to this level, when they got to this situation, if you had to solely rely on him to bring it home, probably wouldn't be able to get it done. That's not his fault. That's the case for a lot of teams. We'll probably talk about here in a little while. Maybe the case for a team in Texas. Maybe I don't know if Quinn Ewers is good enough to beat some of these teams when it comes down to the wire. If you have to rely on him. But I thought they were an extremely well-coached football team. Defensively, they did a great job early on, responding after those long plays from Penn State offensively. And then the inverse is also true. Penn State, Andy Kotelnicki. I tweeted it out. Every time he runs, every time he calls a play that's not a run play between the tackles or a scissors concept, something that's trying to pick play and get Tyler Warren open, he should have to run a half gasser because that's just ridiculous. The game would have been probably 48 or 49-14 and probably been done a lot earlier if he would have just kept it vanilla. I can't believe how many times it was 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, and they're trying to throw the ball deep or get Drew Aller out in the pocket and move. You're running for 6-7 yards carry with Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. Keep it simple.
Well, but that's Andy Kotelnicki's nature, though. This is a guy who was with Lance Leipold at Kansas. He had to scheme it up. He's been in the D3 ranks before. Like, this is a guy who's always sort of got those tricks up his sleeve, those gadgets. So, like, he's always got to try to mix it up. It's just not part of his nature, but I agree with you. If they would have just ran the ball between the tackles with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen 100 times last night, they probably win by 40.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And like I said, bro, I think, Tyler Warren is the X factor. I think when you have some talented guys like that, you may want to open it up some more and do some of those gadget plays and those tricks and stuff. And, Drew Aller, for all the hype that he gets, he is a very talented quarterback. He has the arm that makes you probably believe, hey, some of this stuff can work. And he made some really good throws last night that got dropped. But it's the point where your ego as a coach has to come second. Yeah, the plays might be great. Yeah, you might have the talent to do it. But if the guys aren't executing it down in and down out, and this has been the theme for them the entire season, if guys aren't able to execute it down in and down out, stop calling it. Do what works. Right. You might be the greatest offensive mind there. And it's some, people have this same type of qualm with guys in the NFL level, like a Kyle Shanahan, sometimes a Sean McVay. Just because you have the philosophy, just because you have the scheme, doesn't mean it's always conducive to winning football. So I think if they're going to be able to win a national championship, because they're 2 games away from a national championship, it was crazy to say about Penn State. But if they are able to get there, those type of mistakes and those type of situational quirks have to be rid.
Yep, 100%. 100%. Now, I do want to bring this up because I saw a little bit of this on the timeline just because this is how this works, because Boise State got the bye. Now, I think we're going to switch up. The college football playoff is going to switch up how the byes are handed out. I think it'll be you don't have to win your conference as long as you're a top 4 team in the country. According to the college football playoff rankings, you're probably going to get those top 4 seeds. You would end up getting a bye. I think it's dumb, and that's why they're going to change it. But there was a lot of conversations about deserving in Boise State. But this was relatively respectable with what we're seeing in Pasadena. This is my question to you. I want to tie these first 2 conversations together. With what we're seeing in Pasadena right now, with Oregon just getting trounced by Ohio State, what is going to be said about that? Number 1 team in the country gets a bye, plays a team that already played against Tennessee, handled business relatively well. And I think they're one of the best teams in the country. Don't get it twisted. But what are the conversations when they get their ass whipped if this score potentially holds? Because I think there's a lot of conversation when a Boise State gets beat by a lot, when an Indiana gets beat by a lot, when an SMU gets beat by a lot. There's a lot of conversation, a lot of negativity around that. What gets said about what's going on in Pasadena right now if the score holds?
It's an interesting thing to think about, but I'll start with the fact that the most deserving versus the best thing takes a little bit of a hit in this argument, because the most deserving team was unequivocally Oregon. I mean, if you look at Oregon's body of work, they won the Big Ten. They beat this team already that they're playing right now.
And we assume they're the best, too. You beat Ohio State. You beat
exactly. We assume they're the best. But all year, everybody had been talking about if Ohio State puts it together, if Ohio State puts it together.
Sure.
And right now, they're finally putting together. And this is the team that everybody coming into the season and even leading into the playoffs, a lot of people believe was the best. If you have them playing at their best, nobody can beat them. And we may be seeing that come to play right now. So I think that's an interesting concept, because maybe you look at some teams that are outside. Look at what BYU did to Colorado in the Alamo Bowl. Maybe they are one of the 12 best teams in college football that didn't get a chance to play after they decimated Colorado like that. So I think, for one, that has to be able to be – we have to flesh that out, right? Which is it? Is it the best or the most deserving? One. Two, does Ohio State even deserve this opportunity? Is the playoffs still too big? Because we look at some of these blowouts. We have all these blowouts, right? But then we have the game like this where it's a blowout in the inverse. It's probably like nobody was expecting this type of blowout. But did they deserve the opportunity to play for a national championship in the first place after they lost 2 regular season games, one to this team and one to a 7-5 Michigan team? I think that is an interesting question to pose, because if you're going to say we need to reduce the playoffs because of the bigger blowouts, maybe this is the same way, like, hey, like Alabama, before Alabama played their bowl game, everybody's like, well, they have one of the best rosters. Maybe they'll put it together. And no, that doesn't work like that. So I think that's where you start with the conversation. And then going forward, I think it's we will talk about this later in the show, but it's on the journalists, it's on the people who have these national spotlights to keep it consistent.
Yeah.
If this was SMU getting blown out, if this was Boise getting blown out 40 points, we wouldn't hear the end of it.
Yes.
So I think there's a line that needs to be held accountable, because too many of the journalists and the talking heads and the guys that are on the table are turning into Reddit college football.
Straight up. Right.
So I think we need to keep it consistent there, and it starts there with those people.
Hell, you see shade thrown out by like Brett McMurphy, one of the best news breakers in the game in college football. Man. It's like I almost listen. Everybody's allowed to troll a little bit. I understand the day and age we live in, but like I feel like we have gotten to a different level. And I know you have something you're gonna have to get it off your chest here in just a moment. But I want to finish up our college football playoff conversation. Arizona State. Shout out, man. They went out swinging. It didn't look good for them in the first half, 17-3, but they came back, and I will say this about Kenny Dillingham. He let his damn nuts hang. That's all I can say about the guy. He did everything in his power to give his team a shot. He had 2 ridiculous trick plays, gadget plays, where you have Cam Scatabo throwing for a touchdown, then his punter goes and gets throws for 32 yards and gets the nice conversion on fourth down. Cam Scatabo left it all on the field, 143 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, 42 yards passing, and a touchdown. He even had 8 catches for 99 yards. The guy was all over the place, but they go down in double OT, 39-31 at the hands of Texas. I have a lot of respect for what Kenny Dillingham has done this year, and for him to potentially have a chance to go win that game. Quite frankly, it feels like they should have won that game. They had a perfect situation there. Quinn Ewers dropping back on 4th and 13, and they just let a wide open receiver right over the top. I don't know where the safety help was. I think there was a miscommunication in the back end. But for them to have a chance to win that game, it's a testament to Kenny Dillingham and the job he's done over just 2 years. It's unbelievable that they were even in this position. And looking back at like the coaches that I came across, like Mike Norvell, Dan Lanning, and Kenny Dillingham, it's amazing to me to think, and I know we could have some conversation about last year, like Mike Norvell, should have Florida State have gotten in, should they have not got in, whatever. It's amazing to me Kenny Dillingham got into the college football playoff and competed in a college football playoff before Mike Norvell did. That's amazing to me. And it reminds me, I'm in a group text with a lot of my former teammates, and there was somebody, Jason Stewart, backup quarterback. He had to remind me. We're sitting around the campfire one night. We were out in Jackson, Tennessee. I hated going out there because they had like chiggers all over the old field. It was at the Lambeth campus of the U of M, the University of Memphis. It was awful. It's awful to go out there, but we did it for team bonding or whatever, sitting around the campfire one night. and we're just sort of doing the team bonding stuff. And even the coaches are getting involved. They're like, oh, so what goals do you have in the next 10 years? And it gets to Kenny, and he's like, I want to marry my wife. I want to have kids. So he accomplished both those things. And then the third thing he did say, this is kind of amazing when you look back at it. He said, I want to be the head coach at Arizona State. And he's able to accomplish that and then take that Arizona State program into the next level. Like, there's a lot of guys that can get to that final goal and relax and think they have it made. He pushed through, man, and I'm just impressed as hell. And I know that he didn't even win today, and we probably should be talking about Texas, but that was a valiant effort by Arizona State, and I feel like they're the story. They're the story to me.
Yeah, I want to give Dilly a ton of credit because, one, you said he let his nuts hang for sure, but two, he also trusted his kicker, bro. If you look at that kicker coming into the game, I believe the broadcast said he was 4 of 13 coming into that game. So he went 2 for 3 today, and the only kick that he missed got blocked and tipped at the line of scrimmage. So as much as he was the riverboat gambler, he went to fake punts, right? He went on in 4th and short at a couple of instances. Went out on his sword for sure. There was no doubt about that. But I thought it was cool that he was able to trust his kicker in moments like that. To me, that shows a huge vote of faith for your guy. He was struggling all year, but you believe in your team. You believe in your guys. He never got too high, never got too low. I know a lot of coaches preach that, but a lot of coaches don't live by that. A lot of coaches wear their heart on their sleeve. We can use a guy like Brian Kelly, for instance. He's a guy that you're always going to know how he's feeling on the sideline. You look over there at Dilly, it was never anything. And the rest of that staff too. Hines Ward was right there by his side the entire game. I don't know the guy's name, but the strength coach with the big beard right there the entire game, pumping everybody up, whether they were down 15, 16 points, whether it was a tie game, whether they had the lead in overtime, they never changed on that sideline. So I think that is the number one indicator of a great culture because you look at a lot of teams. I don't want to say that about Oregon because I think they have a great culture, but you look at their sideline in this first half of the game, I know it's a different feeling being shell-shocked as the number one team in the country. You're 13-0. But it's some dejected faces over there. Some guys that are melting down on that sideline. But I never saw that from a team like Arizona State. Now, I think a little bit of that is that you don't have anything to lose in this situation. If you lose, everybody's going to say, all right, you still had a fantastic year. But to have the guts and the courage to go out there and do that, I think it's very respectable. And I want to give them all the credit in the world. But talking about Texas, I'll just say Texas real quick before we move on. If you look at Quinn Ewers' stat line, Quinn Ewers looked like he had a fantastic game. He went 20 for 30, 322 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 1 interception, and then he had 6 rushes for 1 yard and a touchdown. So 4 total touchdowns, 328 total yards, only 1 turnover. But that game could have been over early in the third quarter if he would made some of those throws that were wide open and made a decision not to throw a couple of them that gave the ball to the other team, whether it be through bad field position, getting behind the sticks, or just forcing the ball deep and wasting it down. I don't know. I'm a guy that is a Quinn supporter because he is a good college quarterback. I don't know what he's going to be on the NFL level. I don't really care. But
he might come back for another year. He's getting offered $6 million to come back to school, right? Or go elsewhere probably because Arch Manning's going to take over Texas.
And that's because he is a good quarterback. Sometimes good isn't good enough. If you had a little bit above that, a little bit, if we're talking about pushing closer to great, maybe this team wins it all. I think they're as talented as anybody. I think they have as good a scheme as anybody. But if you don't have the quarterback that can go out there and execute when it's there, it was like watching Jalen Milroe the other night. I don't want to beat on Milroe, but Brock Osweiler is just ripping them apart on the broadcast because guys are running free all day. And the offensive line, while they didn't have their best day, were protecting him enough to where he can make these throws. It's like the opposite with Quinn. Milroe can make the throws, and Quinn doesn't want to make the throw. It's just confusing to me when I watch these kids play. But I don't know if he's good enough to lift him to the promised land. And as good as he was late in the game, you wouldn't have even had to be there if he was good early in the game.
I mean, I think I'm just going to put this is how I felt about Texas all year, man.
Yeah.
Like, do I really buy that next round they're going to be able to stick in a game and go win one? Not really, no. Like, I just don't have some overwhelming hope that Texas is going to start playing at the peak of their powers. They just have not looked great all year. And for Quinn Ewers, this may sound unfair, and it may be unfair. I don't know. But he's the highest ranked recruit in the recruiting site era. Highest rated quarterback. He hasn't his career is good, but it feels like he hasn't quite lived up to that, if that makes sense. He hasn't quite lived up to that type of expectation, even though he's been phenomenal and like the stats tell a different story. It's just there's something missing with the guy. Now, I think he'll come. What do you think is going to happen with him this year, by the way? I mean, this offseason. I mean, is he going to do the NFL, or is he going to come back for $6 million? I can't imagine he's some first-round pick. If he decides to go to the NFL, I mean, this is going to be an interesting decision from him.
I think it's interesting with all these quarterbacks, right? You look at a Milroe, you look at a Quinn Ewers, you look at a Drew Aller. All these guys are guys that should probably come back for another year. But who's quarterback 3 in this cycle at this point? Nussmeier said he's coming back, and that's another kid that I think should actually think really hard about declaring. But right now, it's Shadur Sanders.
Hell, I think Carson Beck needs to think about
I mean, those are the top 2 unequivocally. After that, who knows? So I think that is the tempting thing when you have a chance. We know how much people are reaching on quarterbacks because they're desperate right now. So if you get a quarterback desperate team, you go out there and you have a nice pro day, you have a good combine, you have good meetings. Who knows where some of these players can end up? So I think that's the intriguing part for a player like Quinn Ewers that does have some of the accolades that we're used to seeing, right? You look at him, you were talking about his career feeling like a little bit of a letdown, and I agree, but I pull up his career stats in 3 seasons as a starter, and he's missed time in each of these seasons, right?
Yep.
Multiple games. He has 8,523 passing yards, right. 53 touchdowns, only 22 interceptions, 65% completion percentage, and 7 rushing touchdowns. So 70 touchdowns to 22 turnovers, and then almost 9,000 passing yards. I mean, it's pretty remarkable when you look at the stats and you're like, man, it feels like this guy sucks at sometimes. And then you look at the tape against, the Michigan, the Alabama tapes. The
Alabama tape from last year's nuts.
I mean, he looks like he's one of the better quarterbacks in the country. So I think that's a long-winded way to say who the hell knows. He has every opportunity to come in, and he could go as high as quarterback 3, or he could get $6 million to come back and transfer to a team that I'll be quiet on right now. But it's been a quarterback factory, right? So I would hope to see him come back. That is my wish for him. But who knows, if he enters the draft and let's say he goes to a Mobile in the Senior Bowl and lights it up down there with all those quarterbacks, who's to say he wouldn't go quarterback 3 in this draft with his pedigree? So I don't know, man. I think the good thing for Sark is that he's a guy that has his next options, and then his next 2 options, he has Arch Manning, and then he has KJ Lacey behind him. So he has a stable of quarterbacks that he likes in the event that Quinn Ewers does leave. But I just don't know, man. I don't know if he's the guy.
Now, there is one game in the college football playoff that we're not talking about, and it's for good reason. And I want to first immediately throw out some prayers for the city of New Orleans. Terror attack. They're still trying to find details, but it has pushed back the Notre Dame and Georgia game until tomorrow, this will be playing today, I should say, at 3 p.m. I think there's some question as to if they're going to move the game time up or whatever, because I don't think they want the 3 o'clock kickoff time, but very unfortunate situation and very sad situation in New Orleans on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Yeah, man, it's incredibly sad. And I think I saw some people kind of commenting like they shouldn't move the game. They shouldn't do this. Listen, man, we all love football more than anything in the world, but that is secondary when it comes to human life,
100%.
when it comes to local.
And we don't know the threat's still out there.
Yeah,
I mean, we don't know how big the threat is. You have to assess these things. You can't just have one of the big, because what are these people looking for? They're looking for big events. Right. They're looking for a crowd of people, just like New Year's Eve was.
Yep.
And you just, if you play the game today, you're giving another opportunity. And I just think that for people to say, I saw that out there. I just think that's insane. Like we try to push through too much for the sake of entertainment and football and sport. No, we're not pushing through this one. Yeah, we can delay it for a day and we'll be all right.
Yeah, and there's reports of multiple explosions happening earlier in the day today in New Orleans, where they think the governor declared a state of emergency because they think it's a more wide coordinated attack. And football is just secondary to that, man. I mean, there's no matter how much we love it, no matter how much we would love to see him play, that's not important right now. So I do think that it's important to, 1, send our condolences to people that lost their lives in the attack, and 2, give a little bit of perspective. Like, hey, we all love football. We want it to be the game right now. Everybody wants to see Georgia and Notre Dame play. But when it comes to just human life, that is just always going to take precedent over anything that is related to a game. So
100%.
Definitely looking forward to the game, but that is first and foremost, man.
All right, now getting on to a little more of bowl season, not the college football playoff. A team that people were mad was not in the college football playoff. Let's go to Alabama. Kalen Deboer, 9-4 in year 1, but a loss to Michigan. 19-13 in the bowl game. I'm gonna just throw this to you, Kai. I know you got the Alabama takes ready to fire off. So give me your thoughts on year one of Kalen Deboer. Well, like, how do we term this? I don't think it's an overwhelming success by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm also not going to sit here and act as if it's some ridiculous failure because he didn't reach the college football playoff and didn't reach the Saban-esque sort of goals that have been set for that program over the last 15, 16, 17 years. So, like, where does this fall on that scale, if you will, from a success to a failure?
It is a success in the sense that the talent retention, the culture, the ability to compete with the best teams in college football is 100% still there. Alabama is still as talented as anybody in the country. They're still as attractive as anybody in the country with the recruiting. They finished number 2 in this recruiting class. They've shown that they could beat some of the better teams in the country. You know, they beat Georgia, who's playing in the quarterfinal, who won the SEC. They went and beat a Missouri team that went and got 10 wins this season with their quarterback. You know, they beat a South Carolina team that won 9 games. They beat 3. I believe they went 3-1 against ranked teams. To me, what made Nick Saban great was not the ability to win the big games. It was the ability to keep the team playing at the same level in the games that weren't deemed as big, in the games that were against the quote unquote mediocre teams. Kirby says this all the time. Saban tries to hammer this point home all the time. Is that anybody on any given week in the SEC can beat you. And people always look at them like they're crazy. People always look at them like you're Alabama, you're Georgia, yada, yada. But it's true. You have to prepare the same. You have to play with the same intensity. You have to coach with the same effort, with the same attention to detail in the schematics. And I don't think you saw that. I think that is where the failure is. The success is in the most important things. The talent acquisition, the talent retention, the ability to compete with the big teams, get up for the big games. You dominated LSU in Death Valley. I mean, you look at some of the great things he was able to do, but it all gets balanced out when you look at the negatives. So that is my challenge to Kalen Deboer and the Alabama staff and to the players that are going to be there, because there are going to be some guys that leave after this, and rightfully so. And there's going to be some guys that want to be a part of it to get it back to where it was, and rightfully so. But my challenge to Kalen Deboer, and not to the fan base, because the fan base is going to do their thing. They're going to act like it's doomsday. It's been 17 years, since the Alabama has won less than 10 games, which broke the streak this year of the longest streak in NCAA history. So the earth is falling to Alabama fans, and I get it. I'm not talking to them right now. There is no talking to them right now. But to Kalen Deboer and that staff, that is the challenge, to get them to understand that week in and week out, anybody can beat you. And just because Nick Saban was there, Bear Bryant was there, Gene Stallings was there, doesn't mean that people are going to lay over for you. If anything, it's the opposite. People finally smell blood. They feel like this is their chance to pay Alabama back for those 17 years of ass whoopings. So you're going to get the best shot for the foreseeable future. It's not going to go away because you lost a couple games this year. People are going to try to kick your ass every week, every game. And that's the challenge, to get them to play better in those moments, because there's no excuse to lose to that Michigan team yesterday. I know the rain kind of put the game out of control in the first couple minutes of the game. Weird circumstance where Bill Rowe was fumbling the ball. They throw the weird pick, and just inexplicable. But the second half of the game was just poor execution. I think the play caller was suspect. I think Milroe played his worst game as a college player, but the defense played so well, it's just hard for me to be mad at them, especially for the positions that they were put in. The starting field position in the first half was on the plus 21 for Michigan, and they came away with only 16 points in 5 possessions. I can live with that. They scored 3 points in the second half. I mean, they had less than 80 yards passing. The run game didn't have much going on outside of a 20-yard run. It's like hard for me to be mad at the defense, and that was the story of the second half of the season. The defense playing much well enough to win the game, top 10 in scoring defense the last 8 weeks of the season, and the offense just not figuring it out. So I don't want to pull it all on Milroe. I don't want to put it all on Sheridan, but I think that is my challenge. 1, keep everybody up every week in and week out, and 2, get the offense back. Kalen Deboer has to take more accountability of that offense. Point blank period.
Yeah. Now, it's just kind of funny, and I know I'm going to oversimplify something that's not as simple, but that team was like this all year.
Oh, yeah.
Just roller coaster. And like the years of Saban, one thing we did learn is there was always this steadiness. You know what I mean? There was always just this steadiness to that program. Every player felt it. You had good team leadership. You had good leadership on the coaching staff. It just felt like a transition year to me. And to me, a 9-win transition year, not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
I think Kalen Deboer is a guy who can find some stability there. I think he's got the players. I think he can make it happen. Now, Alabama fans are going to continue to freak out, but he's just got to find some stability. He's got to find a way to sort of never be too high, never be too low, have his team play like that. It's just they were way too up and down because their best ball was national championship contending.
Yep.
But their worst ball was middle of the pack SEC.
Yep.
Middle of the lower tier SEC, quite frankly, with Oklahoma.
And that's how you get a 9-4 record.
So, like, it's just like the peak and the valley were just so damn far apart, probably farther apart than anybody else in the country, in my opinion.
No question. I think USC is the only team that was maybe it's close. I think when USC was playing at their peak, they were a very good team that probably could have won 9-10 ball games, maybe squeaked into the playoffs. But I 100% agree with you. Alabama's peak looked as good as anybody as we've seen all year. The team that played Georgia, the team that played LSU looked as good as anybody as we've seen all year. And I think at least going forward, the Alabama's defense, that style of defense can work.
Yep.
Even in the games that they lost in the second half of the season, the Tennessee game was not on the defense. They created 3 turnovers in that ball game. There was plenty of opportunity to put that game away early on for the offense. The Oklahoma game, they only gave up 17 points, and I really only fault them for about 13 of those because the second one they got was a pick that could have been pick 6, and they end up giving up a field goal. So I think the defense proved that it belonged, and they're all really young. The defense isn't going to lose much of anybody outside of Jihad Campbell, which is a tough guy to replace. But going forward, you have to fix that, man. The consistency, like you said, that's just my biggest thing. If we have this same conversation next year and they're sitting here at 9-4, then I'll be looking at Kalen Deboer a little differently.
Sure. Now, on the other side, this Michigan win, I mean, kind of makes me ask some questions.
Yeah.
Because Sherrone Moore finished 8-5. And his last 3 wins, I know Northwestern's not very good. They were 4-8, but he beat him 50-6. Goes on the road against Ohio State, wins 13-10, and then finishes off against the number 11 team in the country, Alabama, winning 19-13. And it posed this question to me. This game to me, year 1 for Sherrone Moore, considering what he took over, J.J. McCarthy, the whole offense, off to the NFL. You have to reload a little bit. With the way the season ended, was this quietly impressive or loudly mediocre? Because I think, previous to that Ohio State win, you would have said this was a mediocre season. You needed to have a better response after winning a national championship, being about 6-6, being on that 500 pace. That's not good enough at Michigan. But the way they ended the season, the strength they ended the season with, going and getting Bryce Underwood, I mean, this was a hellacious sort of turn for Sherrone Moore. And we'll see how it all ages. But I'll say it. I think you can tell by my tone. I think this was a quietly impressive season for Michigan. This was a guy who had to take over for Jim Harbaugh amid all these scandals, all these different things, recruiting violations during COVID and the sign stealing scandal, the whole offense and defense leaving for the NFL. He's got to deal with all of, Jim Harbaugh gone, players leaving. He's got to deal with all that. And yes, there were some bad moments this year. There were some struggles. But the way he was able to get it together and sort of peak at the end of the season, even down Will Johnson the whole year, I thought it was damn impressive. Damn impressive by Sherrone Moore, the way he finished. Because I feel like if you're Michigan, you have some pretty high hopes heading into next year. New quarterback coming in, that was your biggest issue. And you handle business against your biggest rival, a team that looks like they can win the national championship. It's probably the favorite to win the national championship in Ohio State. I think Sherrone Moore did a heck of a job when it was all said and done. Now, 5 weeks ago, wouldn't have had this take. But right now, the way things look, I'll give him a thumbs up.
I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm leaning more towards loudly mediocre than quietly impressive, only because if you were good enough to do it against Alabama, and it wasn't Alabama's best team. I know a lot of people were talking about, They had a lot of guys out on Michigan. So did Alabama. I mean, if you look at even on defense, they had half of their starters out. And on offense, they lost a ton of support guys. But they were severely outmatched talent-wise against Alabama. And they were even more severely outmatched talent-wise against Ohio State. I will say this. There is something to be said for being able to get comfortable as a head coach. It's different than being a coordinator. It's different than being a position coach. Being able to lead a team, I think that is just the mentality, the disposition that he has. I think that is just coming to fruition. I think that's Wink Martindale getting a little bit more time to get in the zone and to really see what's going on and see what his players give him. So I will say that I'll give them a little bit of grace there. But if you could do it against Alabama and Ohio State in those circumstances, you could have done it against some of the other teams. You could have finished the job against Indiana. And I have respect for Indiana and Kirsten Eddy and those guys. You could have finished the job against Indiana. You could have finished the job against some of these other teams. You could have put up a better fight against a team in Texas that has shown they're vulnerable to other teams. I mean, we've seen they just went to war with Arizona State. Texas went to war with Vanderbilt, who finished 7-6 this season. And I think Vanderbilt is better than their record says they are because of the schedule and competition and all that. But my point is, they had opportunities to be that team as well and to be in those games. If not win those ball games, at least put up better showings. So I will say that I'm a little bit in between. I think the way they finished is 100%. I think it's loudly impressive. And I also think that the beginning, let's say the first 8, 9, 10 weeks of the season was loudly mediocre from a team that probably had more talent than their record indicates. But if you look at it from this point of view, Alabama finished 9-4. Michigan finished 8-5. That's a 1-game difference. It's not too crazy there. We're not too far off.
Right.
A team like South Carolina finished 9-4, who everybody's super high on going into next year. It's not too far off of that. So if I'm going by that lens, I'll say that it was quietly impressive for them. But in reality, I think it's somewhere in between.
Well, here's the problem with that Michigan team this year. They couldn't score fucking points. They couldn't score points. They didn't have a quarterback. You had Davis Warren and Jack Tuttle and Alex Orji couldn't throw the ball out of his own shadow. Running out there next year, you're going to have Bryce Underwood. I think you can get some things going. Also, you lost your lead back from last year.
Yep.
Lost your lead wide receiver. You still had your good tight end, even though you weren't able to get him the ball very much. You lost 4 or 5 starting offensive linemen. Like you lost a whole lot. Now he's going to have to reload those things. He's going to have to show that he can recruit and sort of keep that Harbaugh train rolling. But I don't know. I mean, I was impressed by the end of the season. Also, I will say defensively, this is going to be probably his biggest thing is Will Johnson, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant.
Yeah.
You're going to have to find a way to replace them.
I know everybody's hell been on the quarterback thing, and having a plus quarterback will help, no question about it. But they got to get some more talent out there on the receiving end. I mean, it's just simple that you're losing.
But also, can we be honest about Sherrone Moore and Jim Harbaugh? They find a way to make very, very talented quarterbacks look kind of normal, pedestrian. They just run it off. They just ask them to run an offense. That's all they do. Even J.J. McCarthy, for how highly thought of he was and how highly thought of he was coming out of high school, and he was good at Michigan. Don't get it twisted. It's like on the field, we talked about it at the time. It's just nothing overly impressive about what he did when he was at Michigan besides win games. That's just sort of what Sherrone Moore and Jim Harbaugh and that style of offense, that's what they tried to do. That's what they tried to do. All right, now let's do this real quick. We did have the old Citrus Bowl, South Carolina and Illinois, and Brett Bielema and Shane Beamer got into it because Beamer was trying to play some Beamer ball. And then what they do, like a reverse deal, sort of reverse on the kickoff return. Then there was a guy down on the field, and Brett Bielema was over there and gave like the sign that says, we're not going to bring the ball out of the end zone to either way. There was some pleasantries exchanged. Obviously, Illinois ended up winning the game 21-17. But what do you think about the back and forth between Brett Bielema and Shane Beamer? Shane Beamer had to be restrained at one point.
I'm on the sideline. I'm on the fence, right? I think what Brett did was hilarious. And like, as just a consumer of the product and watching the game, I thought it was really funny. As a competitor, as a guy that's been a coach before, I can imagine how frustrating and actually upsetting it was for Shane Beamer to be on the opposite end, the receiving end of that. But at the end of the day, it's like nobody really cares, bro. Get over yourself. I really do believe that at the end of the day. Like, it's funny to me. I think that it was done in poor taste, but that's just football, man. I think worse things have been done and said on the football field. I think the tactic is something that, one, is a referee problem, not a Brett Bielema problem. By the rule, you're only supposed to get 3 seconds to initiate the exchange after the substitution. Well, what they were doing is they were letting them get one substitution package off, and then they were giving another 6 seconds to get another one. They were
but it was Brett Bielema sort of getting payback for the kickoff return where they threw up the T or whatever and said that they weren't going to take it out, and they ended up taking it out.
Right.
It felt like there was. I don't know. I
think the funniest thing is that
it's a nice back and forth
pattern with Shane Beamer. Like, when his emotions on his sleeve like this, if you look at some of the stuff he said in press conferences, some of the stuff he said on the field in the on-field interviews, like, he got into it at Alabama with the referees and had a little something spirited to say in the on-field interview in the game. I think he needs to work on that in terms of just keeping his emotions under wrap. But again, man, I thought it made for a great spectacle. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it invigorated the game. I thought it invigorated the timeline. It got people excited about a bowl game between Illinois and South Carolina, which outside of hardcore football fans, nobody really gave a damn about. And it got everybody talking about it. NFL guys started tweeting about it and tuning in. So I think it was great for the spectacle, but I do understand why Shane Beamer was upset.
And by the way, can we give Brett Bielema a damn Nobel Peace Prize? 10 wins at Illinois. Last year's team, he's in the top 25. I mean, it's just,
impressive.
The guy can coach, brother. Yep. I don't give a damn what you say. He may not have been good for the SEC and Arkansas and the whole thing, right? But we know he can do it in the Big Ten. We know the big offensive sets, the big running backs playing some nice defense. We know that works in the Big Ten. He's done it at 2 separate places and had a lot of success, Wisconsin and now Illinois. Now, real quick, I know you have something you got to get off your chest. You think there's an overlap between troll pages and actual college football content? I think that's sort of the idea of what you're going for here.
It's just I hate the people. I don't want to say I hate those people. I hate the notion that ESPN and the SEC run sports media like these people that are pushing this narrative don't work for CBS, The Athletic, NBC. You guys have the platform. You guys have the voices. You are writing the pieces in the columns every week. You are reporting on these teams. You are the ones that are voting for these AP polls every week when the rankings come out. You're the ones that are voting for these awards when it's award season, in all conference season, and all American season.
Right.
You are the narrative. So if you are going to be the ones to sway public opinion, have some responsibility about it. Like, don't sit there and tell me that ESPN SEC relationships are ruining college football when the whole Fox noon kickoff is all Big Ten guys and Mark Ingram, and you got Urban Meyer, Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush on there pushing Big Ten stuff. That's what the networks do. It's just in their interest. You choose to focus on that. So instead of talking about those games that play on Fox on noon kickoff, you want to talk about SEC because it generates more clicks, because more people watch SEC football. Generally, it's a better product. Generally, they're better players playing there. That's what it is. But don't tell people that there's some grand conspiracy going on, SEC, ESPN, when you work for the people that are in direct competition with them. It's just, to me, it's unethical to me. I see some pages from respected journalists that resemble Reddit college football Twitter, or resemble some of these meme pages that blow up by doing stupid stuff on Twitter. I won't say the guy's name, but there's a guy, I'm watching the Arizona State game, Arizona State Texas game. In the middle of the game, he's tweeting, "Can you believe people had this team ranked below Alabama?" And I'm like, what the fuck does Alabama have to do with anything that's going on right now? This is the reason that Alabama gets, it's like, you are the journalist. You are the guy that should have been writing about Army, that should have been writing about BYU, that should have been writing about some of these other teams on the outskirts that had an outside chance to get in. Y'all can't stop talking about it.
I think I know which journalist or talker you're talking about, by the way, too.
It's just
you
like,
can't stop tweeting about Bama.
These guys, they can't stop doing it. It's like, why were they talking about Alabama as the team that immediately gets left out? When people say SEC teams should get in, everybody goes to Alabama. Why are y'all spending time talking about SEC and Alabama when you could have been writing a national column that drew attention to Army, that had a real case at 11-1 with the AAC championship win? It was pre the Navy loss. This is before all that happened. Why was nobody talking about that team? Why was nobody fighting for Kalani Sitake and BYU in those teams? They spent 2 weeks, instead of writing about those teams and doing their job about college football, talking about SEC and Alabama, because ESPN is doing their job as a network and talking about the team that they're paying to play every week. It's as simple as that. If Fox and Big Ten, and if I don't want to sever a relationship because I know people at all these networks, but it's like, do your job properly. You don't have to talk about the SEC and those guys. I just have to say that there's too much overlap. There's too much mean BS going on. There's not enough real reporting going on. There's not enough people that actually know enough about football to watch the games and have an educated opinion.
The irony of the whole thing, though, is it'll be people from CBS or whatever going after ESPN and the SEC's relationship, and they'll go after SEC teams. But then in turn, like, they are literally upholding their network and their job. Like, I don't know. I think what you said, saying it's unethical, is the right way, but like you're doing exactly what you are saying that ESPN people are doing.
It's nasty, bro.
You're like you're just reverse advocating. You know what I mean? It's like the fact that they don't see that, especially the guy you're talking about. I'm not going to name the name.
Yeah,
but the guy that you're talking about in particular, it's like you don't see what you're doing. Bro, like you're doing the exact same thing to them that you feel they're doing to you. Whatever. But hey, I'll say this here on G5 Classified, we advocate for everybody. We advocate for the little guy too. We advocate for our group of 5, maybe group of 6 soon. Quite frankly, we'll see what happens with the Pac-12. Now let's go ahead and grab a break on that note. We'll come back. We'll talk with former Memphis quarterback, my former quarterback, Riley Ferguson.
I think that Penny Hardaway has grown infinitely as a coach. He is more comfortable in his skin as a coach. He has made really, really strong decisions. Before the season started, he fired his coaching staff. He took a role player after giving him multiple chances to get back and get right with the team, told him to go away. Penny Hardaway made the decision for Tyreek Smith to not be on this team anymore.
He's better at dealing with bullshit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and then or maybe it's not better at dealing with bullshit. He just cuts the bullshit out. He gets rid of it before he
put up with
it.
I think that is, on top of all the other things you said, is one of the main reasons that we are going to see a different team, because Penny Hardaway is a different coach.
Tune in to On the Bluff with Christian Fowler and Gabe Kuhn every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Ultimately, if we just talk about DFS, though, like I cannot come here on this Monday morning, New Year's Eve, and be up in arms with you guys, because I've always just acted like he is a role player. He's not the answer. He's not the solution. He is not a guy I would overpay for. Would I take him at the Conchar Kennard top 15 protected first price? Yes, I would take it. If it went over that, walk away from the table. The only thing that sucks about it is it's the freaking Lakers.
I don't give a damn that we didn't get him. I really don't. It's just, why did it have to go to Los Angeles? And why did they have to come in out of nowhere? It's just like, it's really, really frustrating. It feels petty.
Oh, there's this nice little property on the corner lot over here that you've been saving your money to go buy, and then Berkshire Hathaway comes in and swoops it up and puts a McDonald's on it or something. Like, come on, like, really?
Tune in to The Daily Grind with your host, Lute Hatmaker, every Monday through Friday at 7:30 a.m. live on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Back rolling here, and we have a treat for you, man. Riley Ferguson, former quarterback at the University of Memphis, my quarterback for the last 2 years. Yes, I was on campus. We made it to a conference championship. He's got a lot of he was in the record books, even though he only had 2 solid years there. But Riley, what's happening, man? How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's good to be on here with y'all.
All right, now I get this question all the time from people around town. What you got going these days? I think people want to know.
Yeah, hey, I've been relaxing, man. I currently work for Lowe's. I'm a recruiter for Lowe's, so I work remotely. I'm living out in Charlotte, North Carolina. Working on getting a house. That's the next goal. But yeah, man, just been working and watching sports. Still competitive as ever. Go out and play golf quite often with some of my friends and my brother. And yeah, man, spend time with family and friends, and that's pretty much what I've been doing.
All right, you know what would have helped you afford that house, though? You know what would have helped you? Is if we would have got some damn money when we were in college. What do you think about these dudes these days, man? You would have probably, like, we were talking about it off air. You probably would have been $1 million quarterback year too.
Yeah, man. Hey, like I was telling you, I think I would have been. And it's I wouldn't say a shame, but I'm just glad that we could help pave the way for the guys that are getting it now. I mean, it would have been nice to have back then because, like we were saying off air, it was a struggle. Going from month to month, getting those checks, and then it wasn't very much back then either. So that really didn't help much. But yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that they're getting what they deserve because it's a full-time job when you're playing college sports, especially at a high level Division I school.
And Kyron, I've had this conversation with Kyron before too. And he's surprised at Memphis the way we were playing that this didn't happen for us. We weren't getting paid off the books. I don't know why people have this assumption because we were winning 10 games a year or whatever it was that we were getting paid off the books. No one on our roster, from what I understand, maybe a couple of guys. But I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name names. We weren't. I can tell you for a damn fact, I wasn't. You weren't.
No, I wasn't. I'll be the first to tell you. It would have been nice to have a check sitting in the locker after a game or something. But hey. It never happened, but it is what it is, man. I'm like I said, I'm glad that they're getting what they deserve now because, I mean, going back and looking at it, I don't know. I just feel like we were being used in a certain way, and now they're getting their value in playing a sport that's very demanding, and even other sports. It takes a lot of your time, a lot of effort, and you're also a college student while you're playing these sports as well. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, man. I want to ask you about it, transitioning out for one into, the workforce and the life force. Can you kind of talk about that? You had a stint in the NFL. You had a very successful college career. Can you kind of talk about that? Because I know it's really hard for a lot of athletes. I know I was happy and fortunate to be able to kind of land in the media side and be able to do my thing writing and doing, the podcast and radio stuff, all that good stuff. But can you kind of talk about some of the struggles that you might have faced? Because I know it wasn't easy for me at first trying to figure out what to do next.
Yep. So, I mean, after football, man, it got to a point, I actually decided to walk away from it all. My heart wasn't in it anymore. All my injuries, concussions and stuff, man, I just didn't have the love for the game anymore. And I decided to walk away. I mean, I had some pretty good, money as far as the trading card deal that I signed. So I was, living off of that right when I got, done playing and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I'm going to be honest, man, it was hard. It was really hard trying to figure it out. And I know there's probably a ton of other people who have played a sport their entire life and then, decide that it's not what they want to do anymore. And they're trying to figure out another avenue or another lane. It was tough, man, pretty depressing. And, I formed some anxiety issues and stuff. I'll be open about it. I feel like talking about it is, the best thing to go about all that kind of stuff. I'm in mental health, but, I have a great support system. A lot of people around me that definitely, were there to help me. And I have some friends that actually helped get one of my first positions. I became a staffing recruiter. It was about maybe 8 months after I stopped playing. Became a staffing recruiter and started hiring people. It was actually for construction, like trades and commercial construction. And then COVID came around and man, I got to a point that, I was like, I just need to challenge myself. I need something new, something that, I just something out of the ordinary. So me and my girlfriend now currently, we actually ended up moving out to LA. And we didn't have anything going on, didn't know what we were going to do, just kind of said, hey, we're going to do it and see what we can make of ourselves out there. So went out there. She did well in social media. She's like a social media manager and stuff like that. And then that's actually when out there I was trying to figure it out. Things weren't working out. And I spoke with Gabe a little bit. I actually reached out to Silverfield and asked them like, hey, man, anybody, that'd be willing to, help me out with an opportunity. And he was like, Marvin Ellison, the CEO of Lowe's was just here talking to the team yesterday. And he said, if there's anybody, that needs an opportunity or whatever the case may be. So he got me in touch with him. He knew who I was because I was pretty successful while I was at Memphis. And he's a huge Memphis Tiger football fan with him graduating from there. So he actually got me plugged in and I became an ASM in the store out in LA for about a year, a little over a year. And then, with my recruiting experience, just kind of coming full circle after everything, I got back into recruiting. And now I'm doing what I've wanted to do, getting in with Lowe's is, working in a recruiting position in corporate. I get to work remote. So man, I can't complain, get paid well. And I'm blessed that everything's worked out how it has.
See, that's badass that Ryan helped you out because, like, I sort of look back at our days at Memphis and our head coach, really good coach, Mike Norvell over at Florida State, but it felt like the relationship at times could be sort of transactional. You know what I mean? Just sort of, what are you doing for me on the football field? Then I'll help you scratch my back. I'll scratch your back. The fact that you've been done for this many years, he's still helping out. I also feel like we have a couple of coaches out there right now, Dan Lanning at Oregon, Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, that are like that as well, where you still keep up with those guys?
Yes, I do, of course. So the one that I talk to the most, I would say, is Dillingham. And I know we were talking off air, man. I would do anything for Dillingham. That's the kind of coach you want to play for. He's somebody that cares about you outside of the white lines, and I think that goes a long way. And even after you're done playing for someone, say you're a player, they're the coach, and do you really care about somebody? Like I talk to Dillingham probably once a month, maybe every other month. It just depends on what's going on. He's a very busy man, but just little things like that, man. It goes a long way. And like I was telling you off air, man, I'm not surprised one bit he's where he is at this fast. Because being that type of person and having that personality, you attract positive energy and people who want to be there and want to play for you. And like I said, run through a wall for you. Whatever you ask of them, they're going to do it because they know you care.
Yeah, but it does surprise the hell out of me, man. He took over a damn dumpster fire. Let's be honest. I know it doesn't surprise you just because of the type of dude he is. And he can go recruit the best talent because he's very genuine when he gets in front of you. Honestly, he probably has some decent NIL money and connections because he's from the Valley there. He's from Arizona State, went to Arizona State, so he knows all the business owners and everything else. But to turn that shit around that fast, that's crazy to me.
Something I think that helps him in recruiting too. He's relatable, man. Like he's a younger coach, and I think that he can kind of connect with the younger generation and the younger group of kids. And I mean, he was that way with us at Memphis. I mean, he was one of the
GA brother.
Yeah, he was a GA. Like so, he went from GA to quarterback coach, tight ends coach, to offensive coordinator, all within like 3 years. And that was when he was a GA. I remember my first time ever meeting him. He came in a bubble jacket. We were in the weight room. You were in there working. It was the offensive group. We were in there working out. Kenny Dillingham comes walking in, and I'm like, who is this little guy in a bubble jacket? The bubble jacket was like consuming him. And I'm like, who is this? He was so like energetic, like, man, I can't wait to get to work with you. And then from that day on, man, like, it was never a change in who he was. He's been the same way since day one. And that's something you got to respect about him.
Yeah, man. Can I ask you, what advice would you give to younger guys now that are coming into some of that money and are having these opportunities to kind of, reap the benefits of their work? Do you have any advice that you would give to those kids? Because I know, I would love to have gotten some of that piece of the pie. Yeah. But I don't know if I would have been ready for some of that money to come in at that time. I would have probably done some crazy stuff out there with that bread.
I understand that. No, for sure, man. Like that's a lot of money that's getting thrown at these kids. These kids, I've heard even out here in North Carolina, like high schoolers are starting to get to a point that NIL stuff can start happening. So I think the biggest thing is, man, have people in your corner that you trust. Have some type of advisor to kind of be able to point you in the right direction, even if it's not your parents, someone that's professionally in that field that can actually help you out. And then I wouldn't say, try and live as normal as possible. That money is going to come to an end at some point, whether it's NIL or whatever the case may be. So just be smart about it. That would be my biggest advice to the younger kids, man.
Yeah, telling 18 to 22-year-olds to live as normal as possible, that's a losing battle. I can tell you that right now. But still, you're speaking facts.
Yeah,
but
I know
it is what it is.
That's why I get older though, man. I swear, because that's advice I would have gave myself, and it would have been tough for me to live by that. That's why I say having people who have either been through it already or have knowledge and experience in it, man, and support you and have love for you and you can trust. That's the biggest thing, I think.
All right, now holler at me about this, and I hate to open up old wounds, I guess is probably the best, but holler at me about Butch Jones at Tennessee, brick by brick, all that nonsense, then transferring, going to JUCO. How was that experience, man?
It was crazy. So I'll take you back to before all that, actually. So I committed to Coach Dooley when he was at Tennessee, and he actually ended up getting fired. Butch Jones got hired, and man, I didn't even really want to commit to Tennessee to begin with, if you want me to be honest. Where I wanted to go was the University of Alabama. And they had 2 quarterbacks commit. So the thing is with Alabama is you have to go throw for Saban, or you did before you could commit for him. So I went down there, man. My mom spent a lot of money to get me down there for a camp, and 2 other quarterbacks committed the day I was flying down, and they didn't tell me at all. So I wouldn't say wasted the money. It was a good experience.
Do we
man.
remember the names of the quarterbacks though, real
It
quick?
was Cooper Bateman, I think, was the
Okay.
quarterback, and I don't think he ever played at
Yeah.
Bama. I'm not sure exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I didn't keep up with what exactly happened with him, but man, I remember that it killed me. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after that. So I went on a visit down to Tennessee. It was a camp actually. Me and Josh Smith, he's another receiver who actually committed with me, and we went there. He was actually my roommate when I went to Tennessee. We went to that camp together, and they offered me on my way back home. It was Coach Dooley, and committed to them. He ended up getting fired. I stayed committed. People were in my ear saying like, you're there for the school, not the coach, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, all right. I'm 18, 17 years old at the time. I'm tired of the whole recruiting process to begin
Right.
with. So I'm like, I'm already committed. I'm just going to stick it out. And then Butch Jones comes in, and I mean, he was a good coach, but as far as like, it's kind of like the Norvell situation a little bit. It's like he kind of, you scratch your back, or I scratch your back, you scratch mine in a way. He has like a super military attitude, like kind of approach about how he goes about coaching and running his program. And I don't know, it just didn't work out, man. It just wasn't for me. Got to the end of my first full year while I was there, and I'll be the first to admit it, man. This goes back to the advice. I did not leave the right way. I literally went home it was the break right before summer break. I went home and I just didn't come back. I went home and I was like, man, I don't want to play there. I don't want to go there anymore. I don't know. Just something wasn't right. And people were telling me I was crazy and I did the wrong thing. And looking back, it probably was in the way that I did it. But as far as leaving, I don't think it was the wrong decision one bit. And I'll stick by that. But I ended up working, man. Like, I came back home and I didn't know if I was going to play football anymore. I ended up working for 7-8 months. I was detailing cars up at a dealership for about 4 months. And then I started powder coating fences
Right.
for about 5 months. And then a junior college called me out of nowhere, Coffeyville, Kansas. And that's kind of how I ended up at Coffeyville. They literally reached out. I said, I'm willing to hear y'all out, kind of hear what the opportunity is and stuff. And they came and had a visit with me at home. I never went out there one time. Went out there to Coffeyville, Kansas, and committed there. Went to school there for a full year. Went there 2 semesters, and then played well enough to get the scholarship at Memphis, man.
Yep, for sure. Now, well, how do you remember? I'll give you my recollection here in a second, because I think people want to know about this. How do you remember coming into Memphis? Like, because there was a coaching switch. You were the first quarterback. You were like the handpicked quarterback. Like, how do you remember the relationships and everything building from there when Norvell brought you in?
It was it was different, man, but it's kind of crazy because I feel like that happened when I went into Tennessee. It was different for me because I was always the starting quarterback, always had the reins, and just kind of learning how to earn people's respect and kind of show what you can do on the field. And then after leaving there, going into a junior college, I had to do the same exact thing. I was a brand new quarterback there, kind of had to earn my respect. So I kind of took that approach the same way at Memphis. And I knew what I could do, man. I knew my talent and, how I was in the field. And, I'm always humble about everything. And I'll never forget it, man. I was sitting up in study hall with Marco Montgomery. And I was telling him, man, like, I'm going to be the starting quarterback here and like all this. And I was like, I'm going to, break records. And he's like, man, you got some big shoes to fill. And I was like, no, I know I do. Trust me. People said the same thing back in high school talking about Christian LeMay. And I've been doing it my whole life, man. So I just kind of took that approach, and I was like, man, just, go out here, earn everyone's respect, get them to trust you and see kind of how you work on the field and then what you're capable of. They'll be able to see it when you go in that practice and do it every single day. So that's kind of how I approached it, man. I knew the coaching change, things would be a little shaky at first, kind of with the trust building, which is a big thing in programs, when you get a new coach. And I'm sure like your perspective is probably different than mine because I'm coming.
The truth is we had David Moore and Brady Davis on the roster already. One of those guys was supposed to be like the next in line. And then you have a coaching switch, and we didn't necessarily like said coach at the time when he's coming in and he handpicks his quarterback. And like, you have these different feelings, but obviously you earn respect really quick that first spring, so it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like it all worked itself out, and you're good friends with Brady and David.
Yeah, man. Like I said, that's kind of how I approach it, man. I'm never about downing someone or throwing shade on someone. We're going to go out here and we're going to work every single day. You know, the best man will get the position is kind of how I approached it. And like I said, going back to it, just earn the respect of the team, man. Go out there and sweat your ass off, you know, running and doing those workouts in 110-degree heat and in the winter when it's 5 degrees outside and there's frost all over top of the ground. We're running on an ice rink out there, man. It was crazy. But yeah, that's what it's all about. And that's honestly what I miss more than anything is the camaraderie in the locker room and stuff, man.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Marco. He's a Spanish Fork kid, and I'm a Fairhill kid, so we played against each other all throughout high school. So Marco is a great dude and a hell of a player.
That's my guy.
It's funny how small the football world is, and it's kind of cool that you talk about the relationships you've built and how they've carried you over in your personal life. You know, you talked about your time away from the game, but can you kind of give me an inclination of what you would have done in this transfer portal era? You were a very good quarterback. You broke a Paxton Lynch record. At that point in time, who knows who would have come calling and what those numbers would have looked like. Can you talk about how you may have navigated your way through that situation? Because when you go to these small, I'll give you a little bit of bail here. But when you go to these small schools like we went to, people think it might not be as big of a deal, but it's really the opposite. There's nothing else for them to talk about or do. Jacksonville, Alabama, where I went, we run the whole city. I mean, everything revolves around Jacksonville State football. So if you would have left, you could have alienated a huge portion of people that could carry you in these relationships after the game is gone. Whereas you go to a big school, small fish in the big pond, all that good stuff. We know how it goes. But can you kind of talk about how you may have navigated that situation?
Yeah, I think, man, my biggest thing, if I'm looking back at if that would have happened, I think my first priority would have been negotiate with Memphis. It's Memphis till I die, man. Like that's kind of how they gave me a chance because like when I was in junior college, I had Texas, I had Oklahoma, I had South Carolina, and then I broke my collarbone on my throwing shoulder. And that was 3 games before the last season. And they actually all backed out. I had like Arkansas State, Memphis, and I think there was a few other, I think Troy and Temple. There was some other schools as well, some smaller schools, and it kind of threw me for a loop, man. Because like at the time, I was rated the #1 passing or pocket passing quarterback coming out of junior college, and then when that happened, man, I don't know, something about Memphis just felt right, and they gave me a chance. And when I went out there, something felt right as well. It just felt like home to me. I know a lot of people say that, but it reminded me of Charlotte, like a smaller Charlotte, and just the grit of the people there, and kind of I don't know, just the feel of it, man. The energy just felt right. But that would be my main thing, man. Try and negotiate there. And then I don't know, they're throwing out some crazy numbers, man. But I don't know. I really have no idea what I would have done, to be honest with you. I would have tried to stay at Memphis as much as possible. Hopefully, an alumni could have made something work out.
It is crazy, though, how much different it is, man. Because, like, I didn't get any money thrown at me, but when I graduated, there was a couple of schools that came calling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it was like hopping out as a graduate after 4 years of work at one school. Like it's hard to do that. Like, nowadays, though, if you're throwing a bag at me, you're throwing a check at me, I'm running probably.
Right.
Yep. I'm immediately hopping in the portal and going and committing.
That's how I felt. You know, after that year, we went to the national championship, and we went to overtime with Auburn, and everybody was coming after our seniors because we had a ton of transfer guys. So we had a ton of seniors that could have gone somewhere the next year, and we wouldn't have had to sit out because we were going to be technically transferring up from FCS to FBS. Yeah. So it was a very tough decision even then. They weren't throwing any crazy numbers around that or anything, but even then, it was kind of hard to say no. But you talk about the foundation you build at a place and how that can carry you, and just all the work you put in, the sweat equity, the meetings, and the going to the gym and doing the mat drills, all that stuff, that really matters to me. Like, and I think it matters to a lot of guys from our era where you put in all that time, you put in all that effort. It probably means a little bit more to us than it does to these guys now. But I can't fault these kids because if you're throwing 7 figures at me at 19 years old, 21 years old,
absolutely,
it's hard to say no.
And it goes back to our original conversation too, like building those relationships back up in 1 year or 2 years, whatever it is. Like you had to do it in 2 years. That's tough to do, man.
Yeah,
you have to be intentional about that. You have to be intentional as hell to build those relationships back up.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. But I got a question for you, man. We're football players. We're guys that have been through these things. And do you have any game day quirks where you're a guy that had to like wear the certain hoodie, or you have to wear your same wristbands every game? Did you have to eat the same pregame meal every game? Were you one of those guys?
100%. Always wore a left glove.
Okay.
I always put tape on, and I put, everyone who has passed away in my life on one arm. One of my favorite Bible verses, Philippians 4:13, and then just some other quotes on my left arm. And then other than that, man, that's pretty much it. And then I always made sure my gear was right. I always had a visor on at all times. And then, yeah, when it got cold outside, I wore 2 gloves. And then other than that, no, as far as appearance, that's about it.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, Riley, we'll let you get back to it, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Yes, sir,
It was
man.
great
Thank
catching
y'all.
up.
Hey, appreciate y'all, man. Thank y'all for having me. Let me know anytime if you want me to hop back on.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
He is former University of Memphis quarterback Riley Ferguson.
I think that Penny Hardaway has grown infinitely as a coach. He is more comfortable in his skin as a coach. He has made really, really strong decisions. Before the season started, he fired his coaching staff. He took a role player after giving him multiple chances to get back and get right with the team, told him to go away. Penny Hardaway made the decision for Tyreek Smith to not be on this team anymore.
He's better at dealing with bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, and then or maybe it's not better at dealing with bullshit. He just cuts the bullshit out. He gets rid of it before he
put
has
up with
to deal with it.
I think that is, on top of all the other things you said, is one of the main reasons that we are going to see a different team, because Penny Hardaway is a different coach.
Tune into On the Bluff with Christian Fowler and Gabe Kuhn every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Ultimately, if we just talk about DFS, though, like, I cannot come here on this Monday morning, New Year's Eve, and be up in arms with you guys, because I've always just acted like he is a role player. He's not the answer. He's not the solution. He is not a guy I would overpay for. Would I take him at the Conchar Kennard top 15 protected first price? Yes, I would take it. If it went over that, walk away from the table. The only thing that sucks about it is it's the freaking Lakers.
I don't give a damn that we didn't get him. I really
No.
don't. It's just, why did it have to go to Los Angeles? And why did they have to come in out of nowhere? It's just like, it's really, really frustrating. It feels petty.
Oh, there's this nice little property on the corner lot over here that you've been saving your money to go buy, and then Berkshire Hathaway comes in and swoops it up and puts a McDonald's on it or something. Like, come on, like, really?
Tune into The Daily Grind with your host, Lute Hatmaker, every Monday through Friday at 7:30 a.m. live on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Right back at it. Appreciate Riley for carving out some time with us. That was fun. That was really, really fun. Haven't got to catch up with him for a while. And I know there's a lot of people in Memphis that have been sort of excited to catch up with him, because he is he's not the most in the public figure. I can say that much. All right, now let's get to your alma mater. Jacksonville State hired a coach.
Yep.
Charles Kelly, who was just the co-DC and safeties coach at Auburn. He was at Colorado as the DC with Prime before that. He has no previous head coaching experience, but he's been around the block. He's 57 years of age, defensive-minded guy. To switch up from where they're coming from. But like, how do you feel? How do you feel about Charles Kelly and how this could go?
It's interesting to me because it's not a customary hire. Normally they go after established head coaches, guys that have proven they could do it, or guys that are in the system, right? When Bill Clark left, John Gross was already on the team as the offensive coordinator, had a ton of head coaching experience in high school, and ran the offense to a T. So that made a ton of sense for them to just promote him. But for Coach Kelly, one thing I'll say about him is that I'm excited to see what he does, from a responsibility standpoint for himself, because he is a guy that is a hellacious recruiter. He's one of the best recruiters in the country. When he was at Florida State, he was one of the best. Nick Saban had him on staff for 3 years at Alabama. Obviously, he just left Auburn, where they had their best recruiting classes in ages. So I think that is what I'm most excited about. If he is going to be a CEO head coach and recruit and hire coordinators, that's what I'm most excited to see. who is he going to hire for a coordinator? That'll kind of mostly determine how I feel about it overall, because that will let me know what direction he's going in. If it's some young guy that has never done call plays before and he's planning on calling the plays and he's planning on being the CEO, head coach, and doing all that, to me, that is that's a lot to deal with in this era, especially at the G5 level, where you're going to have to over recruit your guys.
100%.
So I think that's going to be difficult. But if he hires an established guy that I know is going to call his own plays, that I know is already going to come in and have his scheme ready to go, that'll signal to me that he's more locked in on the recruiting side, on the CEO side, on the team building side, and that will make me excited.
People don't discuss this enough at the Group of 5 level. How hard it is to be a CEO style head coach, to hire these good coordinators over and over again, because that's ultimately what you have to do. If you have one of the best offenses in the country, guess what your coordinator is going to go do? Be a head coach somewhere, go get a good OC job at a Power 4 school, and they're going to get paid a whole lot more. So you just have this revolving door of guys that you have to sort of figure it out with. Now, Ryan Silverfield at Memphis, like, we have experience here in Memphis with it. Like, he's a CEO style head coach. He's had, hire and fire and, go through a lot of coordinators. He's found a nice little landing spot with the guys he's got now. Jordan Hankins on the defensive side of the ball and Tim Cramsey on the offensive side of the ball. But who knows if those guys are going to get other opportunities elsewhere eventually. Right. I'm sure Jordan Hankins will at some point. We saw him with a couple of good performances this year for Memphis defenses that haven't been so good. But that's something a lot of people don't discuss all the time. At the Group of 5 level, that's why you see a lot of guys, a lot of these schools go after like the offensive guru who calls a bunch of plays and can recruit very well. Like, it's just hard to be a CEO style head coach that doesn't call plays, that doesn't, affect the terminology of the offensive side of the ball, because it feels like if you have a good hire on the offensive side or defensive side of the ball, those guys get poached. You have to start anew. Like, that's the challenge you run into. But Charles Kelly is he's been around the block a lot. You say he's a good recruiter, but he's 57 years of age. He's kind of if you've seen some interviews with him, he's kind of an old grizzled guy. I wonder how relatable he is on the recruiting trail. And like that recruiting, like at Colorado, probably a little easier. At Auburn, certainly a lot easier. I wonder how it's going to be at Jacksonville State now with revenue sharing at the Power 4 level. So there is those sort of conversations we need to have, but we'll see how it works out. If I can tell by your tone, you're a little bit shaky on the hire. Like, you're not like counting them out, but you're a little bit nervous, maybe.
I'm a little bit nervous. Anytime you have a guy that is a first-year head coach, you're going to be a little bit nervous about it, especially because it's kind of like the Alabama conversation that we just had. I know a lot of people may not realize, but here, the culture here is win some form of a championship every year, whether that be a conference championship. Now that we're FBS, when it was FCS, it was to win national championships, conference championships, and now it's bowl games, conference championship every season, because we've proven that time and time again, no matter who's been here. Just in the last 11 years, we've had 4 different head coaches. Every single one of them, well, I'll say we've had 3 different head coaches. We've had Coach Bill Clark, Coach Don Groff, Coach Rich Rodriguez. All 3 of them have at least been to the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs, the national championship of the FCS playoffs, and won multiple conference championships. Every single one of them. So that's the standard, and that's the expectation. And I'm just a little bit concerned because those guys were established in the sense of culture and identity. And I think that when I got a chance to interview him, Coach Kelly, he seems like he has that part down. The thing is going to be, it's different when you're coming from, let's say, when Coach Gross came from high school to Jacksonville State. You're coming up and you kind of know kids, right? You kind of know the pulse of what an 18-year-old is thinking about. You know how to relate to him, like you just said. When Coach Clark came, he came from South Alabama, so he understood what a Group of 5 FCS culture was like because he came from one. I do agree with you. Like you said, it's going to be different. Even though Charles Kelly is a Jacksonville State guy, he played football here. It's been a long time since he did it. So is he going to be able to relate to these kids? I'm excited about that because I think it's a little bit easier to relate to kids when you got that Power 4 budget. When you go to Auburn and you have the Nike deal coming up and you got the boosters, I think it's a little different when you have to really sell a kid on a family, on a culture, on an environment that is not going to be conducive to him making a ton of money. It's going to be about actual development. It's going to be about lifelong relationships with the people here, setting a guy up for his future beyond football, because not a lot of guys from the FCS G5 level are going to go pro. I think that is a much more difficult sell, and I'm excited to see if he can do it because I believe him when he talks, but I'm 30 years old. I've been through the ringer. I know what it's like. I think it's going to be a little bit different communicating that to an 18-year-old. And one thing I like so far is that he's using every tool at his disposal. So whether it be a guy like me or a guy, that's been here before, he's using every tool at his disposal to understand what Jack State culture is, and then going forward to get the guys that we need to get here to be successful. So I'm a little bit nervous, as I would be with pretty much anybody, but I'm excited for the future because I think he can get it done.
Yep. Now for Memphis, they ended up getting a quarterback commit. Brendon Lewis ended up committing to the University of Memphis. He has previously started his career at Colorado with Karl Dorrell. My heart goes out to him. That's where I got my intro to him. Probably not the most fair thing in the world, but obviously because Karl Dorrell's Colorado was absolutely awful. That was the one win Colorado. He didn't have very much success, but then he went to Nevada and was pretty solid, at least in 2024. 67% of his passes were completed, 2,290 yards, 16 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, was able to run the ball a tad bit. I mean, he ran for 775 yards this past season and 8 touchdowns. Listen, I'm not like over the moon. If this was the only commit that the University of Memphis had at the quarterback position, I'd be a little bit sideways. I'd say, okay, with this run of quarterbacks you've had, this is probably, the shakiest ground you're standing on, because you've had Paxton Lynch, Riley Ferguson, you had Brady White, then you had Seth Hennig, who just set all the records. Brendon Lewis coming in for 1 year after that. Probably not the best thing in the world, but you do have a young quarterback in Antoine Hill Jr., who is a top 10 quarterback commit in the 2024 class. This feels like a really good plan in case he's not ready to go as a true freshman. You know what I mean? Like, he's not good enough to just immediately take hold of the job, but he is good enough to take the job if Antoine Hill Jr. is not ready to go, or one of the other quarterbacks, Arrington Mayton's not ready to go. I just feel like it's a nice plan. You didn't need to go get a $1 million quarterback because you have this young quarterback coming in that you don't want to run off. So I feel like this is a nice little way to bridge the gap. And Brendon Lewis is talented enough with enough experience that I think that he could give a couple of lessons to Antoine Hill Jr. along the way. I like the plan here. I always advocated for them to go find a transfer portal quarterback with some experience with Antoine Hill Jr. coming in. And I think this one makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, it always makes sense to load up at the quarterback position, no matter what. I think you look at a situation like Colorado with Caden Salter and Juju Lewis, who's coming up as 5-star quarterback, all that. You look at a team like, Auburn, who went out and got their guy in Deuce Knight at quarterback, but they know he's probably not going to be 100% ready. So they went out and got 2 quarterbacks. They got Jackson Arnold and they got Ashton Daniels from Stanford. So this seems to be a widely followed theme. I mean, even we'll look at Oregon here, who got Dante Moore to back up Dylan Gabriel, just in case the Gabriel thing. Everybody is stacking up on quarterbacks because it is the most valuable position in football, and you need to have a plan. So it seems like Coach Silverfield has a plan there. And you know what? The more the merrier, especially at a G5 level, where it may be a situation. I know Jacksonville State a couple years ago, we ended up playing 3 quarterbacks. Play Smothers, play Zion Webb, and we played another kid. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but you need guys like that can get it done in case of an injury, in case of a guy's not developed and ready to play. So it's a great thing to have a plan, like you said.
Yeah, and I just think this is less muddy of waters than if you – because they were tied to Thomas Castellanos at the very beginning of the transfer portal window opening up. And like, he's a guy who wants to come in and immediately start. He ends up committing to Florida State, and he's going to start there. They got tied to Preston Stone for a while. Like, those are 2 guys that just muddy up the waters for a young, true freshman quarterback that you're trying to develop, that you feel like is the next guy in line to take over and be a star quarterback at the University of Memphis. I think this is just a more mild plan to at least allow Antoine Hill Jr. to roll into, or to grow into the role. Now, final thing, I do want to give a shout out to Mike Buddie, man. Mike Buddie, who is the former now AD at Army and friend of the show. He is headed to TCU. Shout out to him, man. I think really what TCU looked at is the transition for him and the smooth transition for Army as an independent for all those years into the AAC, grabbing a little bit more money, having success on the football field. Like, I think you just look at all those things, how he was able to manage that. He did it with a lot of class. And we'll see how it works at TCU. Feel like they have some solid solid. What's the word I'm looking for at this moment? They have some good things going for them. We're gonna have to see if our guy Sonny Dykes can turn it around. But Mike Buddie off the TCU, shout out to him. Good upgrade job.
Shout out to him. It was a good opportunity. I remember when we interviewed him, one thing he kind of emphasized was, hey, it may never get this good for us again for Army athletics right now. With the way college football is going, with the way everything is set up, we have to take advantage and capitalize on this year. And this was pretty, I believe it was halfway through the season before they went on that really remarkable run. So for him to have the wherewithal to understand where they were and then get an offer like TCU that has a storied athletics program history, and they have more resources in the term of
that's what I was saying. The word I was looking for, decent infrastructure at TCU.
Yeah. So they have a better infrastructure. They have more resources in terms of athletics. So we're talking about just money. Nobody has more money than the U.S. Army, but it ain't going to the football program. So
right.
I think it was an opportunity that he couldn't turn down, and I'm excited for him because he's leveled up everywhere he's been, and he's been successful. So friend of the pod, wishing him the best, and I think it was an opportunity that you couldn't turn down.
Yep, for sure. Well, Kai, this is the end here. This is the end of the show. Where do they find it?
Last show of the year too.
Yeah.
Last show of last year, first show of this year. I just want to say thank you guys. Appreciate you guys for tuning in to G5 Classified as always. You know where to find me on X, on Twitter, whatever you call it, at Kyron Samuels. Writer profiles at Kyron Samuels on Sports Illustrated. And then the Puller Guard everywhere. You know where to find me there. And also, we'll probably be getting back on the radio with Gabe here pretty soon. Yep. So congratulations on that. And happy holidays to everybody. Happy holidays, late Merry Christmas, all that good stuff. Happy New Year. Happy Kwanzaa if you celebrate all that. Happy holidays to everybody. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in and listening to G5 Classified as always.
Yep. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate everybody listening. Kind words. If you've subscribed, you've liked, you've commented, keep doing that. We'll be back here at some point. Kyron will be on the Thursday that I return. I'll be back on January 6th to my normal role at 92.90 ESPN Monday through Friday, 4 to 7. So check that out. Follow me on X at G_Coon71. But we're going to go ahead and say peace. Appreciate you listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of G5 Classified. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. To watch this episode, head over to the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. We'll see you back here next week.